now. Beginning on page 9. Actually, no. First mission station, that heading there. So let's see what we can do, then we'll get into some discussion questions, which I have sent. Have you seen them? Yeah, just check upon them. All right, so first mission station, page 11. So as we said, he made 3 treks. His goal was to see further afield where suitable tribes and locations where he could set up mission stations. He ended up setting up 3 mission stations. And he did not want to, but he was forced to. That was just the nature of the difficult way of life in Africa. The first place where he set up a mission station was Mabotsa, located 200 miles northeast of Kuruman. He and Edward decided to settle there amongst the people there, amongst the tribe there. And what he did was that they began to build a school and also houses where they could stay in that location. By this time, Livingstone was already famous for his medical work. He was much sought after by the various tribes. Every tribe wanted him, and so it wasn't difficult to find a tribe that would be willing to have him. And so him and this missionary called Edwards settled there. Now, things went downhill, well, when he was attacked by a lion. At Mabotsa, the tribe there was persecuted by lions, which would attack their animals. One time, a lion jumped into a cattle pen and ate up the cattle there and jumped out. And so the tribe said, come on, we've got to kill these lions. And they felt that if they killed one, the others would be scared away, which is what tended to happen. And so they decided to pursue, went into the bush looking for these lions. And what they would do is they would form a circle over a huge area and start closing in on that circle, hoping to close in the lion. After 2 attempts, the first 2 attempts, the lions managed to break out of the circle and escape. They tried to shoot the lions, but they missed. And on the 3rd attempt, they enclosed the lion that was seated on a rock. And between the lion and David Livingstone was some grass. So David Livingstone gets his gun and fires through the grass and hits the lion. And tells them, hey, I've got him. And as he's loading his gun again to be ready to fire again, the lion, the people shout out, hey! By the time he's raising his head, the lion is leaping on him. And he turned to run away, and the lion got his arm, beat him in the arm, broke it into 3 pieces, and dislocated his shoulder. And landed on him. The lion's paw was on his head. And he later said that by the mercy of God, when such things happen, God has given us adrenaline. So in the moment, we don't feel the pain of what we're going through. It's God's way of shielding, as David said, from the shock and the pain of what has just happened. And so one of his fellow guys, one of the Africans, also with a gun, tried to point. I can't remember if he fired the gun. The lion now turned to jump at him, and it bit this guy on the thigh. And then another guy with a spear was now ready to go and spear the lion. The lion also jumped on him and bit this guy on the arm. And finally, after that last attack, the lion collapsed dead from the initial bullet wound. Livingstone never quite recovered. His arm set incorrectly, and so he lost 80% use of his arm. He had to learn to fire with his left hand. At least he could move his finger to shoot with his left hand and hold the gun up with his right hand. So he could only really he couldn't raise his left hand the rest of his life above his shoulder. And so he used it primarily just to hold down his journals so that he could write into his journals. But he basically lived the rest of his life in Africa with really only one arm. As he was recovering from that, he was unable to work. Tension began to rise with the other missionary at Mombasa, the mission station they had formed. In fact, this was a staple of his life. David Livingstone kept clashing with the fellow missionaries and Britons with whom he worked. He got along very well with the Africans, had a great relationship with them. For some reason, when it came to the Europeans, the fellow Europeans, he just could not get along with them. Edwards was offended by a number of things that his fellow missionary was offended by a number of things Livingstone did. Livingstone was not even aware that he had offended this man who was older by almost 10 years or about 10 years. And so over time, the relationship really soured. And that's what prompted Livingstone ultimately to find a new location where he could start a new mission station. By that time, Robert Moffat, who he had left in England, the one running the mission station, Kuruman, had returned with his two daughters. And Livingstone fell in love with Mary, the older daughter, named after her mother. Her mother was also Mary Moffat. And so they began their relationship. In fact, while building the mission station at Mombasa, David Livingstone, again with only one arm and the help of the Africans, was building a very nice, big, large house where he and Mary were going to stay as they were engaged and waiting to be married. He told her, if you wonder why I've built, he wrote to her and said, if you wonder why I've built a house, such a large house for only two people, you must be content with the explanation that it is necessary on account of the heat. And that we have nothing to put in the house is no matter. It's a small matter. And he said, this is how they used to chaff people, girls in those days. He said, for I shall think it finished when you are here. So they got married January 2, 1845 at Kuruman. Livingstone was 31 by this time, and Mary was 23. They relocated to Mombasa, the new mission station, 200 miles away from Kuruman, but like I said, tensions began to rise. Again, Livingstone was just falling out with everybody. Remember, he came from England on the boat with another missionary with whom he had been ordained, Ross, Mr. Ross, and his wife. And Ross began to think that Livingstone was interested in his wife. Imagine you are going to do missions, and you start suspecting your brother with whom you ordained is interested in your wife. So Livingstone was saying, I don't understand. The woman was pregnant, and both of them were suffering from seasickness. And as a doctor, I was just trying to help. But now I'm being accused that, I love this woman, and so on and so forth. So he just kept clashing with his fellow missionaries. He decided to leave Mobatsa. And by the way, the chief with whom they had settled at Mobatsa was extremely angry with the other missionary. He blamed him. He said, because of you, Livingstone has gone. You are useless. It's Livingstone who we need here. But Livingstone tried to say, look, don't worry, I'm just trying to do more work and so on and so forth. And so Livingstone now went to Seychelles, Chief Seychelles, to set up a new mission station with him. Now this man, Seychelles, is the one who I just had to put a picture of him because he's an important guy in the life of Livingstone. Seychelles was a very intelligent man. He was about Livingstone's age, so 30s. And Livingstone, he was very interested in being educated. So when Livingstone would visit his tribe, and Livingstone would preach, remember every Sunday he would gather the people around and preach to them. Seychelles would sit there and listen very attentively, and he would look at him, what are you reading? Oh, I'm reading a Bible. Teach me to read. And so he taught Seychelles how to read. And within 3 days, the guy was already reading one syllable words. Within a day or two, he had learned the alphabet and he was already reading. So this was a highly, highly intelligent man, very interested in learning and education. In fact, he became so able to read that he would refute what the missionaries would be teaching because he had read the Bible for himself. By the time, the years had gone by. Livingstone writes to his sister saying, the chief, Seychelles, learned the large, small, and mixed alphabets in 2 days, big letters and small letters. This, although I could only go to him before sunrise in the morning and after sunset in the evening. The house building occupied my time primarily. So Livingstone built this new mission station. Again, he had to build a house from scratch with where Seychelles was and migrate his wife to the new location. Unfortunately, they had to leave that location again and relocate because of drought. Again, remember, this is the desert. This is Africa. And so they decided to move to a new location called Kolobeng. And at Kolobeng, that was the last mission station that David Livingstone set up. And so he moved. Seychelles, again, Livingstone was a hot cake. Seychelles said, look, wherever you say we move, we are coming with you. And so they relocated the entire tribe, along with the chief and David Livingstone, to Kolobeng, this new location near a stream where they could easily access water. The biggest challenge in the African mind that made them dislike Christianity, well, there were a number of things that clashed with their culture. But the biggest one was polygamy. David Livingstone made it clear that you cannot be called polygamous and be a Christian. You'd have to give up polygamy if you're going to be a member of the church and be baptized. And that was the big stumbling block. In fact, one of the tribesmen had only one objection to Livingstone joining their tribe and setting up a mission station. He said, this guy will stop us from enjoying polygamy if he comes. So David Livingstone said, no, you are free to do whatever you want. I'm not going to force you either way. It's voluntary. And that's when they agreed to have him. Seychelles' wives, he had 5 wives. That's the chief, were not happy that he was learning to read and reading the Bible. I mean, you could clearly see that the Lord was working in this man's heart. He even told Livingstone that, you should set up, in fact, he said, I want prayers every day at my house. And he opened it up for people to come and attend the prayers. And the attendance was very good every day. And Seychelles told Livingstone that you can come, share briefly from the word, and we spend time in prayer. And he never tired of reading the Bible and hearing the Bible explained to him. His wives became worried, as well as the tribe he was ruling, that he was buying, they saw his commitment to Christianity growing. And the wives particularly did not want him to become a Christian because they knew that he would get rid of most of them and send them off and only remain with one. Seychelles, in the end, asked to be baptized. And Livingstone said, look, are you ready to give up these women? And he said, yes, I'm ready. And that's how he was baptized. Seychelles actually became one of the early great indigenous African missionaries. I mean, the guy imbibed the Bible and would even apply its doctrines to the African culture. He became an evangelist and began preaching to many tribes, this chief called Seychelles, in later years. However, he really let Livingstone down because guess what? Remember, he had sent away his wives. Huh? Well, one of the wives fell pregnant, the ones he had sent away. So the report came to Livingstone. So he went, Seychelles, what's going on, man? And Seychelles said, sorry, I don't know what happened, and so on and so forth. And Livingstone was so disappointed with him, and was ready to basically kick him out of the church. This is what Livingstone wrote about his disappointment with Seychelles. When Livingstone asked Seychelles himself about the matter, this pregnancy, the chief responded evasively. He said, I shall ask her. He didn't say it's me. Seychelles sent his uncle to question her, knowing that it's him. At first, she refused to tell anything, but at last she admitted that Seychelles had twice had sexual relations with her early in January of that year. Seychelles then sent his uncle to review everything to Livingstone. The chief stated that he had fallen to the temptation of Satan. You see the problem when you begin to teach them doctrine. They even know what to say. He could not deny that he had slept with her. And knowing his own guilt against her, did not wish her to be pressed anymore. Seychelles appealed to Livingstone, do not give up on me because of this. He said, I shall never forsake Jesus or his word. We shall stand together before him. Livingstone wrote to his father-in-law Moffat that he was so broken. He says, I felt as if I should sink in the earth or run away. And I told Seychelles that I could no longer serve with him or be with him. It was not just Seychelles' backsliding that discouraged Livingstone. He was also concerned that even though he enjoyed a good relationship with the local tribes, particularly the Bechuana, which Seychelles was ruling over, at his mission station in Kolobeng, they were called to the gospel. So they were very interested in what he had to offer as a doctor and all these things, but their eyes, and they sat there, they heard the preaching, but they just never converted, never accepted. In fact, the message went out that Livingstone was, after he died, that he was a failed missionary. And it looks like the only convert you can find that Livingstone ultimately won to the Lord was Seychelles, recorded convert. Even though he actually, again, every Sunday would stop traveling and preach to the tribes who were gathered there. Livingstone felt that he needed to spread the gospel to more tribes. He felt, me being here with Seychelles and these Bechuana people, just preaching to them and waiting for people to come to Kolobeng, the mission station, to be preached to, this won't work. And we're seeing very little fruit amongst these people. They are hard of heart. Let me venture up north and visit these other tribes and see other locations where missionaries can be sent to preach to the tribes up north. He thus decided to explore the north. By this time, he and Mary had 2 children, a son, Robert Moffat, named after Mary's father, and a daughter, Agnes, named after his mother. He was keen to go further into the interior. He had heard of a paramount chief named Sebetwane, leader of the Makololo. And he wanted to connect with that paramount chief, knowing that all the sub-chiefs then would become accessible and the sub-tribes would become acceptable. Only one problem. Sebetwane was across the Kalahari Desert. So he began to make plans to go across the Kalahari. Again, there was only a small window when you could get through that desert. He made 3 trips up north past the Kalahari to try to get to Sebetwane. But the challenge was that the tribes he would encounter wanted him for themselves. And so they didn't want him to connect with the paramount chief. And so they would demand for tribute and just make life impossible, stopping him from passing, not advising him about the best routes, and it was really difficult to access Sebetwane. Sebetwane in the north was also looking forward to Livingstone coming. You know, his fame had spread. This doctor who loved Africans and was like none of these other white people. And Sebetwane even sent oxen and men to the tribes down and left tribute to the 3 major chiefs down south, saying, can you help Livingstone so that he makes his way over to me? The first trip, he made it to Lake Ngami. And he was shocked to find that there was a lake there. This lovely lake, because what they thought is it's just desert, there's nothing there. And yet he found this lake and found many tribes. He found that in the interior of Africa it was filled with tribes and people, because they were able to survive due to the water and the lakes that were there. And so he journeyed past the Kalahari. On his second journey past the Kalahari, his family nearly died. One of the workers who was handling the water spilled some water that they had put aside for the trip. And Livingstone was now wondering, we are still far away from reaching Lake Ngami. This guy has spilled the water. How are we going to survive? Thankfully, one of the African servants he was traveling with went searching for water and found some. But even when they reached Lake Ngami, the problem was now mosquitoes. And his family nearly died. His 2 children had fever. He keeps calling it African fever, probably malaria. And due to the mosquitoes, his wife was suffering as well. She had a condition which he couldn't understand, where half her face would get paralyzed. There's a pastor who preached at Hillview a few years ago who had that condition. So when he would smile, half his face was paralyzed. So when he'd smile, only one side smiled. The other was just dead. And so Mary had that condition as well. And he even lost a child in the process, because Mary was pregnant when she delivered now the 4th child, Elizabeth Pine. The child died after only a few weeks. Mary's mother, who was also Mary Moffat, was really getting furious with David Livingstone. And she wrote him some hot letters saying, how can you be dragging your family all over Africa? What is wrong with you? Your kids are falling sick. What is going on with you? Let me see if I can find the letter here. She wrote, "Oh, Livingstone," in a letter, "was it not enough that you lost one lovely babe and scarcely saved the others? The others nearly died. While the mother came home threatened with paralysis." Remember that half-face thing? "And will you again expose her and them in those sickly regions on an exploring expedition, all the world will condemn the cruelty of the thing, to say nothing of the whatever this word is. A pregnant woman with 3 little children trailing about with a company of the other sex through the wilds of Africa among savage men and beasts. So she had no kind words for Livingstone. Livingstone finally gave in and said, you know what? Let me take my family all the way down to Cape Town. And at Cape Town, let me put them on a ship back to England. And then I'm going to go back up again and explore those upper regions for 2 years. And then once we have found where things are and mapped everything out, I'll call for my family to come back at a location where we can settle down. That was Livingstone's plan. And so he trekked all the way down to Cape Town from Kolobeng. And it took him 3 months. These were the distances. So all these things we're talking about, these are years which are passing. So it's not like it's a day trip. No. These are years which are passing. And he parted with his family, and he was quite devastated to have to say bye to them. He wrote them constantly, sent constant letters. People were always traveling, and so whoever you found, you just gave a letter, and hopefully it made its way to the coast, and it would be sent to wherever, And so Livingstone wrote many letters. Here's one of them. He wrote, "My dear children, I write another little letter for you, but it will be some time before you see it. It will go from Kuruman down all the way to the Cape, and then into the ship and over the big wide sea to England. And someday, this is end of page 17, and someday the postman will bring it to your door, and Mama will read it to you. There is a shorter way of sending to you. Can Tom tell me which way that is?" That was his son Thomas. It is by praying our Father in heaven to send you down a blessing. And though I am far away from you, he hears me, and he can send you down his blessing at the very time I pray for it. Is this not a good way? Yes, it is. And I hope you ask him to bless you and to forgive your sins and all your naughtiness. He hears you as you speak. He hears you as soon as you speak to him. And if you pray to him to bless and keep me, he will hear you. My white pony is dead, poor thing. It was found dead in the field. Livingstone then names 2 other animals that Robert, his oldest son, will remember. But these are not like you. They have no souls. But Robert, Agnes, Thomas, and Zuga, whose name was Oswell, I think. But he nicknamed him Zuga because he was born in the area called Zuga. His wife said, "There is no way we're calling our child Zuga." But he still nicknamed him Zuga. So he says, "But Robert, Agnes, Thomas, and Zuga have souls." In other words, you all have souls. The animals don't. And when their bodies die, their souls still live. If your sins and naughtiness are not forgiven, blotted out by Jesus, then you will go away into hell when you die, like the rich man of whom we read in the Bible. Mama will read the story to you. But if we love and pray to Jesus with our hearts, then when we die, he will take us to his home. He takes those to his home whose sins are forgiven, and he came down to this world to die for us. Why should he die for us? We have sinned, and we ought to be punished. But he came down and stood in our place, and our punishment was that by which he died. Our sins were all laid on him. Now everyone who asks of him receives pardon, forgiveness of his sins, because Jesus suffered the punishment already. Oh, how much we ought to love and thank such a kind Savior as Jesus has made himself for us. I have separated myself from you all, my children, and from Mama, whom I love very much too, in order to please Jesus and tell sinners who never heard of him about his love. We have to read one of his sweet letters to his wife. To Mary he wrote, "My dearest Mary, how I miss you now and my dear children. My heart yearns incessantly over you. How many thoughts of the past crowd into my mind. I feel as if I would treat you much more tenderly and more loving than ever." This is how I also feel when I'm away from my wife. "You have been a great blessing to me. You attended to my comfort in many, many ways. May God bless you for all your kindness. I see no face now to be compared with that sunburnt one, which has so often greeted me with its kind looks." I'm sure she was blushing. "Let us do our duty to our Savior, and we shall meet again. I wish that time were now. You may read the letters over again, which I wrote at Mabotsa, the sweet time you know. As I told you," in other words, read those letters I wrote to you when we were engaged. "As I told you before, I tell you again, they are true. There is not a bit of hypocrisy in them. I never show all my feelings, but I can say truly, my dearest, that I loved you when I married you, and the longer I live with you, I loved you the better. Let us do our duty to Christ, and he will bring us through the world with honor and usefulness. He is our refuge and high tower. Let us trust in him at all times and in all circumstances. Love him more and more, and diffuse his love among the children. Take them all round you and kiss them for me. Tell them I have left them for the love of Jesus, and they must love him too and avoid sin, for that displeases Jesus. I shall be delighted to hear of you all safe in England." Unfortunately, Livingstone never received a single letter. They wrote back all the time, but he never received a single letter from them. He had no idea how they were doing, but he constantly wrote them. In fact, he only received one letter. It's the letter she wrote on arrival in England, and he only received it towards the end of his time in Africa before sailing off to go and be with them. So Livingstone was back above the Kalahari with the Makololo, with the chief Sekeletu. Soon after getting there, in fact, on his second trip up, Sekeletu died and was replaced by his son, Sebetwane. He decided to tour the area. Barotse, that should sound familiar. Huh? Now we're getting close to home. So he decided to tour the area. He spent a couple of weeks trying to tour the area and see, and he was delighted to discover a river, the Zambezi. He felt or hoped that this river would be a way in which it would be easier to get around the interior. Because by land, if you try to walk, the mosquitoes kill you. If you try to ride on oxen and a horse, the tsetse fly kills them. So the best bet was if we can find navigable rivers where we can put small ships, small boats, and those can just sail around and deliver resources and people and missionaries and letters and all these things, then we can get some activity going for Christianity in the interior. So he decided to make a trip all the way, and there's a map in there. So look at the first map, talks about the Mako. I should have given this to you, Chalala. Yeah. So let's look at the second map. So Linyanti was right above the Lake Ngami, And you see that that is the lake where, at the bottom of that map, map 2, that is where he, finds refreshment. If you made it to Lake Ngambi, you survived the Kalahari, because the Kalahari was right below that. And now, up above Lake Ngambi, you could travel to Linyanti, where you could now meet with the Makololo and Sebetwani, the paramount chief there. So in discussions with Sebetwani, he told Sebetwani, look, I want to explore the Zambezi and see how far it can take me towards the west, towards Angola, by then Luanda, now pronounced Luanda. They used to say Luanda. And he says, I want to go all the way to Luanda and see whether that is a viable route that can be used to the coast. And he was attracted to the west because that would then be now a direct route to England, isn't it, on that side. And so Sebetwani said, brilliant. If we can find a pathway there and be able to bring trade and be able to sell our elephant tusks, of which they had many, they just didn't have a way of transporting them, then that would be great. So he gave Livingstone 27 men to accompany him for this trek. Now, Livingstone had been warned that he was better off going the opposite direction to Mozambique, to Kuluman. Have you seen Kuluman? Kulumane, at the end there on the right. Because the tribes were much more friendlier. But again, Livingstone was still attracted to the west, to Luanda, because he felt it would be an easier route to England. So he braved it and decided to journey in that direction. And it almost killed him. At every stop, just as he had been warned, every village they encountered, they were stopped by tribes who demanded tribute. For you to pass here, you must give tribute. Now, Sebetwani knew that, and he gave him men and lots of resources, beads and elephant tusks to trade with. But the tribes would actually trick and extort and overcharge, for him to pass through. And sometimes they'll detain him for days, and he's being hammered by mosquitoes and all sorts of things, and suffering with fevers. And it was just a terrible, terrible journey, and it took him a very long time. I think it was a year or so, just to make this journey from the middle there to Luanda. He was aided by Portuguese. So the closer he got to the coast, the more Portuguese traders he met. And those are the ones who kind of helped him deal with these tribes that were trying to take advantage of him and extort him. But by the time he made it to the coast, he was sick, he was broke. In fact, right before getting to the coast, he was even in and out of consciousness. That's how sick he was. And so he had to be nursed back to life, really, when he got to the coast. He arrived there and was tempted to just jump on a boat. In fact, that's what he was told by the people in the boat. Look, you're already famous. News has reached that you've discovered Lake Ngami, which we didn't know that there was even a big lake. In fact, he had been awarded a medal in England for that discovery. You're already a hero. No one has ever gone from the interior all the way to the western coast. Just get on a ship and sail home and go and be with your family. David Livingstone said no. Guess why? He said, I promised Sebetwani that these men who have come with me, I'll take them back. And that's how he journeyed back. His primary worry was that the men would be killed by all these villages where they kept being extorted and, they wanted to kill them and attack them and things like that. He knew that they had more chances with the white man than them going by themselves. And so he said, no, I promised these guys, let me take them back. And that's how we began the journey back, all the way back. Again, that journey all the way back nearly killed him. At one point, he had run out of everything that he could to trade with. He was only left with gifts for Sebetwani from Angola, Luanda, which he couldn't give away. He wanted to give them to the chief, the paramount chief. And at one point outside the village, some of these villages had guns. They would trade what they had for guns from the Portuguese. And at one of them, a chief actually came out with a gun ready to shoot. And Livingstone also removed his gun. And the chief said, no, I don't mean any harm. I mean peace. And Livingstone said, fine, then you go so that we can proceed on our way. And the chief said, no, but I'm worried that if I turn, you shoot me in the back. And Livingstone said, but I can also shoot you in the front. Just go. And that's how he managed to get away from that chief. So for me, it's heartbreaking. You're bringing the gospel to these people. You're preaching to them. You're trying to make a way for them, And they are the ones who are, it sounds like Zambia today. Very similar. They are bribing, they are overcharging, they are extorting. Looks like we haven't changed much from our Bushmen ancestors. But it was the same kind of thing that was going on and happening. And so he journeyed all the way back and received a hero's welcome back with the Makololo and Chief Sebetwani. And they killed animals and they were feasting. It had taken them such a long time. I think it took him 2 years to go to Luanda and come back. Some of the men with whom he traveled, those 27, when they came back, they found their wives had been married by other men. Because the wives had said, these are not coming back. So they found that their wives had even remarried, and it was such a mess. And Livingstone was apologizing to them and saying, I'm so sorry I took you away for such a long time. Your wives have been taken, some of you. And look, we've come back as poor as when we left. We've come back with nothing. And you know what they told him? They told him, Livingstone, thank you. You have opened for us a route to Luanda. And now these goods that we have, we can trade them and take them to the coast to trade them. Some of them immediately even started preparing to go back to Luanda to go and trade their goods. So Livingstone now suggested, instead of me trying to go uphill on the Zambezi, the route wasn't doable to the west. He said, let me now try the east. Let me try and get to Mozambique, the Mozambique coast. And Sebetwani was happy with the idea. He said, fine, you go for it. If we can have 2 routes, that's even better. And so now he was given 160 men. And you see, he was building a relationship and trust with the Africans. And it was unthinkable. Even they thought, there's no way. When this guy goes to Luanda, we'll never see him again. No wonder they gave him just 27 men. We can afford to lose those 27. So for him to arrive back, and by the way, of the 27, he had only lost one who decided to get married along the way and stay. But so he managed to return all but one intact. They said, Takwawa. Such a person. And that's how they just loved him. And no wonder he received that hero's welcome. And now he was given he was given 160 men this time to return with to the coast. Now here we encounter I had to put this in, some Zambian tribes. That's at least some tribes that we will recognize. '21, under some Zambian tribal encounters. See if you recognize some of these names, especially you who are from the southern province. He encountered an area of the Batoka tribes. Who can tell me what is Batoka? today, what is Batoka? Huh? Just after Mons, there's a place called Batoka. So these were that was now the tribe name, Batoka. No wonder the place is called Batoka. So we are now in Zambia, okay? Whose chief was what? Monze. A very primitive tribe, according to Livingstone. Livingstone observed how they rode on the ground from side to side, clapping their legs. I wish we could have someone to demonstrate. As a way of welcoming him. Do we have any Tongas here? These are your ancestors, guys. So they rode on the ground on their backs like this. From side to side. Clapping, not hands, thighs. Their legs. Clapping them. As a way of welcoming him. He did not appreciate it because the men were naked when they were doing this. The women covered themselves a little more than the men. At puberty, so about 13, 14 years old, the boys knocked out their front 2 teeth. So all of them, when they hit 13, 14 years old, they knocked out their front 2 teeth. And the women did it as soon as they got married. Once some young boys found entertainment looking at one of David Livingstone's mirrors. And they were laughing in excitement. And making faces and looking at themselves in the mirrors. The older men, looked at them and said, "See, their ugly front teeth." The boys closed their mouths in shame. So for them, the ugly ones were the ones with teeth. Not the ones, to be beautiful, you didn't have teeth. It was abnormal that you still had teeth, and it made you look ugly as far as they were concerned. Livingstone wrote about the Batoka people, that they are more degraded than the Barotse. They have less self-respect, savage and cruel under success. In other words, when they won the war, they were cruel and savage, but easily cowed and devoid of all moral courage. The majority of my company are of this tribe, and a more reckless set one cannot conceive. We have to keep a strict lookout against being involved by their thieving from their inhabitants, in whose power we undoubtedly are. But it is more difficult to manage their tongues. When the people come to make obeisance or praise, they, Livingstone's Batoka men, make wicked remarks in their own language. And some even point to villages boasting and saying, "I killed a man there. I broke all the pots in that village." And they did it within the hearing of the villagers there. And this too, so for them that was bragging. That's what meant you are a man. And this too, though I believe, if they now saw danger, the greater part of them would immediately run off. So they talked big, but they were actually cowards. When they performed the valiant deeds mentioned, they were in company with the Makololo as a conquering army. They are eager to recount their soldiers' deeds. I called them together and spoke to them about their folly, intimating that in the event of disregarding my orders, it might be necessary to treat them as children and apply that which Solomon says is appropriate to the backs of children and fools. I hoped it would not be necessary and that they would behave as men ought. I think they will obey. In other words, just to get them to behave themselves, ultimately, he just had to beat them. Livingstone trekked down the Zambezi, and to him, he was very happy. He said, "Yeah, this we can use. The Zambezi River from the interior all the way to the Mozambique coast where it empties into the Indian Ocean." It had taken him 6.5 months from Linianti, from Sebetwani. Remember when he got back to the Middle, That middle trip to Mozambique took him 6.5 months, 1,000 miles. Livingstone had done the impossible. He had trekked right across South Central Africa, and it had taken him a total of 4 years. Like I said, he had not heard from his family except for a letter he finally received at the coast from 4 years earlier when she had just arrived in England. So really no communication at all. Livingstone had to wait a month and a half before a ship arrived that could allow him to take the 3-month journey. That's at the end of page 20. That could allow him to take the 3-month journey back to his beloved wife and children. He left his companions at Tete, one of the towns, and asked them to wait for him there until he returned back from England. He gave them elephant tusks that Sebetwane had given him so that they could use them to trade in case he died or something happened to him. They could use them to trade and head back home. But they told him, "You will not die." Arrival in Britain, page 21. Livingstone's arrival on December 9th, 1856 was greatly anticipated. It had been 17 long years. He was keen to travel to go meet his family. Mary received him a day or two later after his arrival with a poem. 100,000 welcomes, and it's time for you to come from the far land of the foreigner to your country and your home. All long as we were parted, ever since you went away, I never passed a dreamless night or knew an easy day. Do you think I would reproach you with the sorrows that I bore? Since the sorrow is all over, now I have you here once more. In other words, the problems I went through while we have been apart, I'm not going to heap them on you now. I'm just glad that you are here. And there's nothing but the gladness and the love within my heart and the hope so sweet and certain that again we'll never part. You can read the rest of it in your own time. Livingstone was the hottest thing in England. He was the guy on the front page of all the papers for months. He was the recipient of multiple awards. Some had already started trickling in while he was still in Africa. He was an in-demand speaker all over England. Using his carefully written journals, he wrote a book which became a bestseller and made him a fortune. Missionary Travels and Researches in South Africa. The book had something for everyone, from a curious child to a scientific mind. It stunned the science world with details of anthropology, insectology, botany, geography, language, medicine, agriculture, hydrography. It was a masterpiece, 650 pages filled with maps and illustrations. On the cover, a zoomed image of the tsetse fly, the little insect that made travel on horseback and oxen impossible in the interior of Africa. Charles Dickens, we know him, the famous English writer, was a contemporary. He was there alive and writing at that time. And he hated foreign missions. I don't think he was a Christian. But this was his review of David Livingstone's hit book and bestseller. He wrote, I have been following a narrative of great dangers and trials, encountering in a good cause by as honest and as courageous a man as ever lived. The effect of it on me has been to lower my opinion of my own character in a most remarkable and most disastrous manner. I used to think I possessed the moral virtues of courage, patience, resolution, and self-control. I find that these turn out to be nothing but plated goods. My self-esteem oozed out of me. Dr. Livingstone's sensible independence of all those mischievous sectarian influences which fetter so lamentably the exertions of so many good men, and his fearless recognition of the absolute necessity of associating every legitimate aid which this world's wisdom can give with the work of preaching the gospel to the heathen listeners are merits without parallel in the previous history of missionary literature. 12,000 copies were printed first. There were 7 more prints. He sold over 70,000 copies, £1 per copy. So we're talking about a good income there. His publisher gave him a generous deal, with him getting good royalties from the book. Livingstone even had an audience with the Queen of England, Queen Victoria. Oh, and we missed. Yeah, how could we miss? He saw the Victoria Falls. Oh, no. I should have mentioned that. Anyway, that's the famous story. Eh? He saw the Victoria Falls on his way to Mozambique, and he measured it out so accurately as it stands even to this day, the Victoria Falls. He said since he was in fact, he had been looking for a discovery after which he could name his queen. And when he saw Victoria Falls, he said, this is it. And he named it Victoria Falls. And so the queen obviously wanted to have some time with him, and meet him. And the downside was that his father had died a year or 2 earlier. We have a list there of Livingstone's accolades and honors, gold medals, freedom of cities. These were little pendants that were given. You can see he got from so many cities he was given this award. Honorary doctorates, fellowships and memberships in societies, royal and governmental honors, including, and he got a lot of money. People just giving him honors and money and all sorts of things. There were meetings which were held in his honor. He got to speak at universities, Oxford, Cambridge. The boy who had grown up at the cotton mill with no great future you could think or talk of was now the biggest hit ever.